Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. That's a good rule of thumb. It's good for life. It's good for work. It's good in a lot of situations. And I think that kind of covers what's going on in the U.S. right now. We need to be ready for where this all may eventually end up if it ends up going down a pretty dark path. In this episode, I'm going to share some tips to help make sure you are prepared. I'm Larry Cornett, and this is Invincible Life. So this episode has probably more links than usual in the associated newsletter. So if you go to newsletter.invinciblelife.me.me, this is Hope for the Best, but Plan for the Worst, issue 123. And I felt a need to create this because I've been thinking about it. And as I'm going to mention a little bit, I read an article about this. And my family and friends are scattered all over the country. So I feel like we have to think a little bit about how can we prepare? How can we be ready? Because what is happening right now seems strangely familiar. I studied a bit of history in college, and it affected me forever. In particular, one semester we studied Hitler's rise to power. And I actually did the required reading. I did my homework. I did all the reading, the textbook and some other books that the professor asked us to read. And we talked a lot about how did this happen? How could something so drastic, so horrible happen? And it wasn't overnight. It was a slow process that snowballed. And I am now seeing the eerie parallels between what happened then and what is happening now in America. My niece is writing an article or a paper about this for school, looking at some of these parallels where you immediately start removing people from the government that don't agree with you, that are pushing back. You force resignations, you do mass firings. And then you handpick people who are not going to push back. You put people in those positions that will do whatever you want. And you control the media. There's a lot of scary stuff going on. And the parallels, if you're not familiar, go do some history reading. Go read about this. And my goal with this episode, it isn't to scare you. It isn't to create a sense of panic. But I'm also not going to stick my head in the sand or expect you to do the same. I mean, we can't spend our days doom scrolling on social media and the news. We can't skip work. We can't stop going to school. We have to live our lives. We can't give up on living our daily lives. However, we shouldn't ignore what history has taught us either. The actions that are being taken in our country are alarming, and I'm not a distant spectator. The continuing layoffs and firings within various agencies, federal agencies, they are impacting people I love dearly. And mind you, these are not well-informed decisions. This is not the work of a genius. This is not the work of someone who's done their homework or is getting good advice, because you may have already read about the firing mistakes they are trying to desperately reverse. They're shooting from the hip. They're cutting with an axe. They're not being surgical. They're not being smart. They're not being informed. And now they have to reverse a lot of it. This administration's actions are brutal, politically targeted, clearly, personally motivated, looking at you, Elon Musk. We know why you're doing what you're doing, and they're careless. I linked some examples. You may have heard of these. I'll read some of the article titles. Trump officials fired nuclear staff, not realizing they oversee the country's weapons stockpile. Oops. And now they're trying to hire them back. Are you kidding me? I mean, why isn't everyone screaming about this? The Trump administration accidentally fired bird flu response workers. You know, that epidemic that's sweeping the nation? And here's where other layoffs are being walked back. Doge in practice. Doge is Musk's corrupt little organization that is trying to cut government spending and find corruption, and the only corruption is really him. Outrage follows boilerplate MAGA firing of a disabled veteran. A disabled veteran with 3, I believe, tours of service with a family was just fired. Yeah, you can tell they really care about veterans, don't they? Musk's Doge cuts based more on political ideology than real cost savings so far. That's a good one. They are firing thousands of federal workers, and right under their noses are billions and billions of dollars being spent for corrupt contracts. You know what? Maybe if we stopped bailing out Tesla and SpaceX, it would more than cover everything we're trying to find in terms of corruption and money that could be regained. Another article, how Elon Musk boosted false USAID conspiracy theories to shut down global aid. And he did. That was found to be a whole bunch of falsehoods that he was sharing on X and other places. Another article, USAID staffers describe colleagues abandoned in violence in Congo as Doge ends assistance programs. Another one agency tried to regulate SpaceX. Now its fate could be in Elon Musk's hands. Follow the money. Anybody who's crossed him and his companies is now being fired. And then finally, we should all be upset about this. Elon Musk's Doge sparks outrage by leaking secret data. So they are accessing our data, and they're leaking secret data that was revealing some of our most secret folks who are working in the government internationally that could be exposed and compromised. It's unreal. It's kind of scary. And it is a bunch of careless actions that are going to affect all of us. But good people are pushing back. They are fighting the good fight. Federal judges are blocking the federal freezes. So they're saying, no, this is not constitutional. You're not allowed to do this. You have to work with Congress, which is true. This is how a democracy works. This is not a dictatorship. This is not a monarchy. It's why we have 3 branches of government. They are blocking the birthright citizenship order, also unconstitutional. And they are finally blocking Doge from accessing the Treasury data because you know what? We did not elect Elon Musk. He is not a federal employee. He should not be doing this. It's like letting a fox in the hen house. Citizens are marching. This just recently happened. And they are protesting this administration all over the country. Many Americans have pledged to stop making any purchases for a full 24 hours on February 28th. It's one of the few ways we can have a non-violent protest and have an impact. What do they care about? What do these people care about? It's all about the money. Follow the money. We now know the companies and corporations that are aligning themselves with this administration. We can boycott them. We can find someone else to give our business to. I've talked about this before. Shop at Costco. Stop shopping at Target. Stop using Meta products. Never use anything from Elon Musk. Do not buy a Tesla. Do not use X. There are a lot of things we can do to affect these people. So February 28th, do not buy anything from any large corporations, period. If you have to make any purchases, do it from small local independent businesses. We should be doing more of this anyway. A lot of this is common sense. A lot of this is a good practice. And there's also talk of a general strike on March 15th. We don't buy anything, we don't go to work. The only people at work are emergency workers, firefighters, police, medical professionals. The rest of us show what it looks like when 80, 90 million of us decide that we're not going to go to work that day. We're not going to support this. We're going to protest what's happening. Because we know things could get worse. They could definitely get worse. Every day it's some new drama. And when things go south, they go south quickly. I shared a link to an article about how Hitler dismantled Germany's democracy in just 53 days. It seems impossible. There's a quote from the article. It says, "In one of the most astonishing political transformations in the history of democracy, Hitler set about destroying a constitutional republic through constitutional means." What follows in this article is a step-by-step account of how Hitler systematically disabled and then dismantled his country's democratic structures and processes in less than 2 months' time. Specifically, 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 days, 8 hours, and 40 minutes. The minutes, as you will see in this article, mattered. It can happen very quickly. So, if things do go from bad to worse, you will not have much time to prepare. And if you wait too long to create a backup plan, it's going to be hard to take care of yourself and your loved ones. So as I mentioned, I read an excellent post on LinkedIn about how to protect yourself and be prepared. It inspired me, and I wanted to create this for you. So, a few actions to consider. One that you should do, and I've already done, is to freeze your credit report with the 3 major reporting agencies. Because contrary to Musk's initial lies, the man lies constantly, it was revealed that Treasury data was left vulnerable when they mistakenly and briefly gave a member of the Doge team the power to alter a sensitive federal payments database. They said it was read-only, that they weren't writing code, that they weren't making changes. They lied. They did. And now Doge is seeking access to the IRS systems. They want to access all of our tax return data. This is not good. You do not want your data in the hands of these young men, if you've seen who they are. Some of them are barely out of their teens. Some of them have already been revealed to be white supremacists and have tweeted as much, and I'm not making that up. Go do a search online. They are actually posting pretty bad stuff on Twitter. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about it. So you want to place a security freeze with Equifax. I've shared links to each of these. So if you go to newsletter.invinciblelife.me, this is issue 123. Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So it's called Placing a Security Freeze with Equifax. It's in Experian. It's Freeze Your Experian Credit File. And then TransUnion, it's Place a Credit Freeze with TransUnion. So I've linked each of those, or you could search for it yourself to make sure you're doing the right thing with the right organization and not a spoof website. But I have locked down my credit reports. That way no one can take out credit in my name, open a credit card. If they get access to my data, it's all been frozen and I have to unlock it. Second is secure your communications, the way you are talking to people that matter to you. You can ask the people in Ukraine about life, what happens to your life when you lose the internet. It's kind of sad. We've gotten to the point where the internet is woven into our lives, how we shop, how we talk, everything we do. So one of the first moves Russia made was to cut access to the internet and mobile networks. So the Ukrainians were left in a world that was only fed by Russian propaganda. That's all they could access. So luckily, good old Elon Musk saved the day with Starlink, right? You read about that, heard about that. Well, it may not have been on the up and up. So Russian operatives were claiming they had access to Starlink, despite Musk reassuring everyone that only the Ukraine was using the services. Not true. Also in September last year, Ukrainian forces downed a Russian drone that had a Starlink terminal integrated into its systems. How did that happen? Doesn't feel safe to be using anything that he has access to or controls. So I would suggest it's a good idea to establish secure ways to communicate with your family and your loved ones. For example, Signal, if you look up, and I linked it, the Signal app, it's a service that uses end-to-end encryption to keep your conversation safe. However, there is the chance that you may lose all means of communication. How would you communicate with your remote family and friends? I have children all over the country. I have friends all over the country. And so if I lost cell phone service and I lost the internet, how would I communicate with them? So I did write an article about that. I shared before. It's issue 121, Create an Emergency Plan for Your Loved Ones. It's a great way to have a backup plan to reconnect with everyone in case things go wrong. We've had this in place, for a long time because we live in earthquake country. And when that happens, guess what? The cell service all went down because it completely got saturated with everybody trying to call and call for help and calling emergency services, and we couldn't get a hold of anyone. So we created a backup plan that says we are going to meet here if we cannot reach each other and something bad has happened, like an earthquake. This is how we'll get back together again physically, and then we'll take care of each other and figure out what we're going to do next, but at least we're all back together. The next tip is to protect your finances. So given Doge's deep interest in accessing the data of the Treasury and IRS systems, we should be careful about protecting our assets. For example, if all your money is tied up in a U.S. bank and assets get frozen, what will you do? What will you do if you can't access your money? There are a few steps you can take to try to protect yourself and ensure you have access to some funds to get by until everything gets sorted out, hopefully. One is to diversify where you put your money. So have money in different banks, we do, and even a safe international account. You got to do your homework. Make sure you are banking with a reputable bank, a reputable institution that has protection like FDIC, all that kind of stuff. Do your homework. NerdWallet has some good resources for doing that. Have some spending cash on hand if electronic systems are locked or shut down. You may need enough to cover gasoline if you have a fuel-based car. Buy groceries, have travel expenses if you need to go somewhere. So having some cash might be a good idea. We did, because that happened locally. We had a huge power outage that lasted days. And when we went to stores to purchase things, they said, sorry, we can't do anything. We can't run credit cards. We can't do the transactions. So we had to shop at places that were willing to do good old-fashioned manual transactions for cash so that we could buy groceries. And then you can have some payment systems funded if you need to use those, right? Like Apple Pay, Venmo, you name it. I mentioned NerdWallet. They have a good article on peer-to-peer payment apps. And that link is in the newsletter, so if you go check that out. I would say it's best to avoid payment apps and services that are under the control of Musk or Zuckerberg. They've proven they're not on our side. They've quite blatantly shown that they're working with this administration, so your money would be at risk. Diversify your income streams. This is something that I talk about a lot with my solopreneur audience. So I have a solopreneur newsletter that I publish, and I've shared this before. Your income is fragile if you rely on one primary source. So if, as the U.S. economy and job market has been struggling, which it has, I'm personally glad I have coaching clients worldwide. So I don't just work with people in the U.S. Working remotely for clients and employers in other countries has never been easier, right? With email and Zoom and payment systems, you can work with anybody anywhere. But if you're busy with your existing 9-to-5 job, I know it's challenging to find any time to spin up additional revenue streams, to have income streams, especially if you're trying to build some stuff internationally. I get it. It's really hard. However, do your research. Be prepared. Be prepared to move quickly later if necessary. We are already seeing employers every single day conducting more and more layoffs. So if you suddenly lost your job and you're finding it very hard to find another job in the U.S., which a lot of people are, you could be looking at an international source of income. A lot of the folks I'm working with are struggling because, there's been American corporations doing layoffs, and now the federal government is firing people. So there are hundreds of thousands of people looking for work. That makes it really hard to get a job. And now companies are reluctant to hire. They are very nervous about this economy and what's happening. So they don't want to spend a lot of money on new employees. So it's not going to be good. Another tip, be prepared to barter. Remember that? If the dollar collapses, we can always revert to good old barter system. The good old, what do you got? What do I got? Can we trade? So consider what physical goods and services you could offer to your local community in exchange for things you might need, right? So if you want to barter for some food if necessary, I know this is sounding like a disaster movie, but this happens sometimes even when there isn't a big federal kind of chaos going on. I'm telling you, I've been through everything. I've been through earthquakes and fires, you name it. And there's times you need to ask your neighbors for help. I know someone who cuts and splits firewood for an older neighbor in exchange for some of the wood so that he can use it in his wood stove to heat his home. So it's a good barter. Hey, I'll cut the wood. Give me some of the wood when we're done. Great. Be prepared for an emergency. So we all experienced this during the COVID lockdowns. This was a global kind of problem, not just in America, obviously. Many have also experienced serious emergencies after earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires, blizzards, hurricanes. I mean, a lot of you listening have probably been through this. I've been through many of these. I lived in Houston and we had a hurricane. I grew up in the Midwest, lots of blizzards that would shut down everything. Tornadoes too. And now I live in earthquake and wildfire territory. So living in these regions where all this is possible teaches you to be prepared. And as Americans, we have a hard time imagining martial law being declared. But it has happened before. It has happened before in the U.S. It happened after the Pearl Harbor attack, for example. It happened after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. There's a few other examples of that. I linked an article that talks about that. Definitely happened in other countries, right? Happened in Hong Kong. Martial law. They lock down. You're not allowed to leave your home. Everybody's given a certain amount of time they can go shop. They're given vouchers. Yeah, it can happen. The streets have to be cleared. Not good. So it makes sense to have enough food, water, medical supplies, whatever you need to take care of yourself and your family if we experience some sort of lockdown where we have limited access to local shopping. And where I live, we've dealt with this. We've had forest fires and earthquakes, numerous ones. So we have food, a lot of food in the pantry for this reason. We have water stores. We have a backup power generator because we need to be able to heat our home. And it's happened. We've had our power go out for weeks. So it's not like it's something that doesn't happen anyway, but hey, be prepared for an emergency. Strengthen local relationships. When we faced these local emergencies, our neighbors were great about helping each other. Providing some gas for your generator, helping shovel snow. We were clearing each other's driveways, cutting down trees that had come across the road. I had to get a chainsaw out and cut a tree. And humanity has done this forever. We've built small local communities since the dawn of civilization. We turn to each other when in need. We support each other. We protect each other. Building stronger local relationships and getting to know your neighbors is never a bad idea. That's why I'm sharing this. This stuff is good to do regardless. Next one that's good to do, secure your vital documents. There's already been some weird stuff happening with people's birth certificates and passports. Some folks who are transgender and non-binary have had things seized and destroyed. And that's just the beginning. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So make sure your online documents are stored safely. Make sure things are encrypted. Keep your paper documents stored in a fire-resistant document safe and have it ready to go if you need to leave your home. Passports, birth certificates, social security cards, any important financial statements, stuff about your mortgage, family photos, things that you can't replace. We had this ready for the fires. We had a big fire that came very close to us a couple of years ago. I had everything boxed up and prepared and by the front doors. If we got the signal to go, they were doing evacuations. The evacuation line was literally a quarter mile from our house. So I didn't sleep much for several weeks. I was watching the fires and tracking the reports, and we had stuff ready to go because fires move quickly. And we could just throw it into the car and go. So have that stuff protected. You should anyway. Be ready to travel. Speaking of passports, how many years do you have left on yours? I would be nervous if my passport was going to expire pretty soon. Lots of people are updating their passports now, their travel documents, so the wait could be considerable. The longer you wait, the longer the wait might be. Some folks are renewing their passports even if they have a few years left on them. They want to have a lot of years left just in case. And I'm not trying to be dramatic because no one believes they will ever have to leave their home. However, I have a friend who had to flee Iran with her family during the Islamic Revolution of 1979, and they never went back. Lives changed forever there, right? Have you seen what Iran was like pre-1979 and what it became? Just like being prepared for an emergency, you should have a plan if things go from bad to worse. For example, before travel restrictions are enforced, and that is a common strategy. I linked more information about that. So know where you will go. Where are you going to go? For example, one of my friends has an apartment in Mexico, and they are ready to travel there in a heartbeat if things start looking bad. So it kind of depends on where your line in the sand is. What is your line in the sand? I've been discussing this with my family and my friends. When do we think things cross the point of no return? What event would trigger your warning bells and signal that you no longer feel safe here? And I know some people feel pretty privileged and secure. They can't imagine anything bad ever happening to them. And, well, that must be nice. Must be nice to feel that safe. However, some of my friends are already nervous, and they are very worried about their safety. And so it wouldn't take much. It would not take much more to scare them into leaving the country for their personal safety until or if America is once again safe for everyone to live without discrimination and fear of attack. So, spend some time to identify what your line is. What event would worry you the most? What would worry you so much that you're now considering getting out before it's too late? And most importantly, what is your plan? Once you identify that point of no return and the event happens, that trigger event happens, what will you do? Where will you go? How will you ensure the safety of your loved ones? What is your short-term emergency plan? And then what is your long-term plan? What happens if this goes on for longer? So just to wrap up, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not. And I don't want you to panic. We can't panic. We have to keep living our normal lives. We have to work. We have to go to school. We got to keep moving ahead, and we have to push for what we believe. There is great beauty in this world and wonderful people, despite the profound evil, greed, and corruption that taints the souls of a few. And I'm not going to pull any punches. They are bad people. We just have to remember that there is beauty, and it's our world too. We may strive to be decent people and kind people, but that doesn't mean we won't resist. It doesn't mean we won't fight if we get pushed to the wall. So I want you to live your life and hope for the best, but I also want you to plan and be prepared for the worst. Hey, if none of this worst case scenario comes true, you'll still be ready. You'll still be ready for other events that can and do happen all the time. Like natural disasters, they do happen. And you'd be doing things you should be doing anyway. You should be securing your data and documents. We should be. You should be safely communicating with your friends and loved ones. You should be building relationships with your neighbors. You should be prepared for an emergency. And finally, just take care of yourself. And that includes a little bit of self-care. I had to take a break last week. Sometimes the news and the social media feeds get a little bit overwhelming. So take a break. Take a break and go for a walk in nature. Go do something to remind yourself of how wonderful this world really is. It always helps me, and I'm sure it would help you. So I hope this helps. I hope being prepared is something you should be doing anyway, and maybe it's a reminder to take care of some of these tasks. Until next time, I wish you the best of luck with pursuing the life of your dreams so you can be happier, healthier, and more fulfilled.